Hey everybody. So I was getting ready to do some work, as I do every day. I don't know about you, but I work 7 days a week because I'm not lazy. And one of the reasons I work 7 days a week is that it spreads out my drawing time so I don't overuse my hand on any given day of the week. By the way, this is not a bandage. It's a little device I use so that when my hand is on the glass of the screen, it's not leaving any oils from my hand. I replace these every now and then, but this one's a little worn. All right, so what you're going to see is an intermediate stage of drawing the Dilbert cartoon. So these are the tools that I use. This is a Wacom Cintiq, spelled W-A-C-O-M. Wacom is the name of the company. And then the model of the drawing device here is a Cintiq, C-I-N-T-I-Q. So if you Google those, you can see what this device is. This would be the common device used by almost every person who draws comics for a living at this point. So if you're not using paper, you're probably using something exactly like this. So this is Photoshop software, and I do the entire drawing in Photoshop. There's no reason that I have to use Photoshop. It's just one of the ways you could do it. I happen to be comfortable with Photoshop, so I do it that way. I think you would find most people would use other software, but for me it does everything I want. So what you're seeing here is the stage of the comic in which it's already written. So the first thing I did was I wrote the words, and that was yesterday. And writing the words for a Dilbert comic these days is as easy as typing, at least the physical part of it. You probably can't see that, but let's see if you can see. Can you see this? So as you can see, my own handwriting is the font. So some years ago, I just converted all of my handwriting into a Dilbert font, available only to me. You're going to say, hey, where can I get that font? And the answer is my computer. That's the only place it exists. And in the cloud, I suppose. So if you're a really good hacker, you can get it. I've been thinking about releasing it, but I don't know. The Dilbert font is only capital letters, oddly enough, because the Dilbert cartoon is always capital letters. There's no reason for that, except that it's a cartooning standard. The comics tend to use all capital letters. It's not a good idea, but it's the common way it's done. So here we see a stage in which I've taken the general characters and plopped them in. So if you look at it, you can see that there are a bunch of screens that are kind of incomplete. So you'll see there's no Dilbert body here. I don't have the face. So these are just placeholders. I just take art I've done before, plop it in, and then I'll make a bunch of adjustments to each of the characters, but they kind of block out the scene for me. I don't know if other people use this technique or not. Now here's one of the things that is sort of really inside cartooning. This is my character Tina, the technical writer, and she interacts with Dilbert almost like a spouse. So anytime I think of any jokes that are more like a real couple, I have these two interact as sort of the office husband and wife. Now, and by the way, I don't know what I'm going to do if remote work takes over completely, because it ruins my whole cartooning thing if I have to have them talking into computers the whole time. You need a little bit of human interaction to make a cartoon work. So I'll work that out. Anyway, here's what I was going to say. The original Tina drawings had her as quite a skinny individual. But over time, and here's the reason you don't keep exactly the same art every time. Over time, you adjust them a little bit so that they drift in the audience's mind. And maybe the audience won't notice it on any given week, but they become slightly different. So here I'm just making Tina gain a little bit of weight. So Tina is going to get a bigger backside over time. And this layer is just the first draft layer. So this is not the finished art. I'm just sort of giving her dimensions. Now for future drawings, I'll have to make that adjustment. So by drawing it every time instead of just plopping them in, the art gets to drift in this way. There's something about this line I don't like. So I'm going to make Tina heavier over time. And Tina is going to kind of take over the role of, you know, the phrase a Karen, somebody who's complaining about stuff all the time. Here I'm just changing the size of my brush. In this case, this is actually the eraser I've changed. So we're going to make her a little more bosomy, and she's going to gain a little weight this year. Coronavirus is going to make her a little heavier. All right, so here are the cartoons drawn very roughly. You can see that Dilbert's hands, for example, are just approximations. And then when I do the final art, I will draw over them this way. So I'll give you a sneak peek at what that looks like. So this is done in what's called a layer in Photoshop. Look where I'm pointing. So these are various layers. So the words are in their own layers. And you could think of this, if this were a physical drawing, you could think of it as tracing paper. So imagine that as a bunch of tracing paper in which there's some things on some paper and other things on others. And ultimately, they're all going to end up in this background layer. But everything above this, I get to play around with until I commit it to, you know, the final drawing. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. So the layer that the drawing is on is this one. And when I'm ready to get serious, I will lighten this layer so that you can just sort of barely see it there. And then I will select a different layer, the final layer, and when I draw over this, the only layer I'm going to keep is the final finished layer, and then when I'm done, I'll just make everything else disappear by just deleting it. So when I'm ready to do the actual drawing, I will come in tight, like this. And here's another adjustment I would make. So I'm not going to keep the hair the way it's shown here. Oh, you can barely see it, but right now it's sticking out a little bit. So when I do the final art, I won't keep that. All right. Now, inevitably, there'll be little blurbs like that one in which I need to reverse it out. So I can just push a button. I've got these little guys programmed, if you can see them. These little buttons here are programmed for my functions that I want them to perform within Photoshop. So that comes, this little keypad thing comes with the device, the Cintiq that I'm using, and I tell it what each of these keys are. So they're my little shortcuts. All right. So the other thing I can do is I can go as tight as I want so that it's easier. And notice that I'm not, maybe you can't tell from the angle I've got you at, but I'm not following my original lines exactly. This is the actual drawing. The other lines are there for the purpose primarily of just keeping things in their proper size and orientation. But the actual drawing comes at this layer. And whenever I make a mistake, I just push one button and it goes away. Now, when it shrinks back down, all of the imperfections disappear. If you were to look at this up close, you'd say to yourself, hey, there's like it's a little bumpy over here, and yeah, these eyebrows don't quite match, and all that stuff. But that's not the size anybody will ever see it. They're going to see it about this size, and then all those imperfections just disappear. So, if you look at the rest of this comic, let's get this stuff out of the way. Here's my little floating toolbar I can put wherever I want. So I start with a file that already has the boxes drawn in. So I only had to ever do that once. And then the stuff between the boxes is there as well. So the first layer is what you saw that is now lightened to become the draft layer. And then I'll do the final drawing over them. And let me read you this comic since you've been teased by it. Here, Tina comes up to Dilbert and says, do you have a few minutes to review my first draft? Dilbert says, yes. Tina says, I ask because usually you say you're too busy to help. And Dilbert says, well, I said yes this time. And then Tina says, that's funny because usually you're all, I'm so busy, but today you have all the time in the world. And Dilbert says, today I'm not busy. And Tina says, I find that suspicious. And Dilbert says, take yes for an answer. And Tina says, that's not how innocent people talk. Now, if you take this scene, for example, I've got a generic Dilbert head in there, but obviously that's not what he needs to look like. So when we go back to the layer in which I'm doing the first draft, we'll show you what this is going to look like. So the first thing that Dilbert would be doing is, I have no idea if you can see this well, by the way, because I'm holding it with one hand and drawing with the other and not really looking at the screen, but I think you can see it. So Dilbert's hair is going to be up like that. So that's the first thing. He's going to have angry eyebrows, a little bit of anger in his forehead there. He's going to have squinty eyes that usually you can't see behind his glasses, but you can when he's mad. He's going to, let's see, will he be bending over? Can't decide yet. Let's look at it. So if I wanted him to be like scrunching over in anger, like he can't stand it, he's balling up in a ball, he would be looking like that. Or if he's screaming at the sky, he'd be looking like that. Which would it be? Which should it be? Should he be balled up like, or should he be screaming at the sky? Well, that's the question. Looks like your comments have suddenly disappeared. Oh, there they're back. Sky, down, sky, sky. Balled up. Oh, there's a difference of opinion here. Sky or balled up? Sky, 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 ball, down. Interesting. So there's more sky than there is balled up. So we're going to go with the majority. Now, and I know you can't see it as well from this angle, but I can't draw it. If I give you the perfect angle, I won't be able to draw on it. So it's just the first draft. So roughly, Dilbert's arms will be like this, and his hands will be like this, because he'll be all exasperated. So his fingers will be apart, like this. He'll be leaning back like this, because you've all told me he should be leaning back looking at the sky. Okay, you didn't all tell me that, but he'll still be in his chair, and his legs will be up a little bit. Here's an example of something I'll probably draw 15 times, which is exactly where are his legs. So again, this is the first draft, so I don't have to know exactly where his legs are going to be. When I do the final layer, I'll make a choice. So he's got 2 arms, and normally you wouldn't be able to see the second arm. But I'll cheat and move it down a little bit so you can see it. Sometimes if I know that Dilbert is going to be exasperated, or one of the characters is, I'll have them carrying something, like coffee or some notepads, so they have something to throw in the air. Then we'll put the little motion lines. Motion line. His ears are moving. We'll give him some perspiration jumping off his head. I always put my perspirations in odd numbers, 3 or 5, never 4. 4 would be crazy. All right, I need 2 hands for this next thing, because I've got to hold the key while I relocate that. Now, since Dilbert's going to be screaming this, it'll be coming from him. And later I'll put on the lines. The straight lines are drawn. Let's see if you can see this. When I want to do a straight line later, I'll just hold down the Shift key and draw it, and it will draw a perfectly straight line for me. So when I'm ready to do the outline of the bubbles, the speech bubbles, I just start like this and make that one go away. That didn't work. And then later I'll fill in the corners. So the way I fill in the corners, actually I'll show you. And you're going to say to yourself, my God, that looks like a really hard way to do that, Scott. Let me tell you 5 ways that this would be easier than the way you're going to do it. And all I'm going to say to that is, you think there are 5 ways that are easier, but they all have a trade-off. So I just take this corner that I've drawn before, and I stick it on the ends of the lines that I just drew. And can you even see that? I guess you can. And I'll do that with each of the corners, but I do all the top left corners first, because these will all have the same box situation. So there's Dilbert. He's going to be going crazy a little bit, and then I've decided that he probably needs to be a little smaller. But got to make sure I'm in the right layer. So he's going to be a little smaller because it's going to look funnier. And then I'll fix Tina's expression later to match this situation. What was that? Somehow I got an extra layer in there I didn't mean. And then I will save my work, because don't you think I should save it? All right. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the intermediate step of a Dilbert cartoon. So the stages of this, I get an idea of some general thing. I take out my blank file that's just got boxes in it. I type in the words, just imagining who the characters will be, because for every idea in the Dilbert universe, it's usually kind of obvious which characters would be involved in that kind of scenario. So if it's something with authority, I put the boss in there. If it's something absurd, I'm more likely to put Dilbert in there. If it's something with human resources, it's Catbert, the human resources director. So you start with the idea, you open up a blank, you think, what would these characters do in this situation? You write your joke. Then the first layer, I just take the heads that I've used before, and I just paste them in about where they're going to be in the scene, so I don't have to redraw every head every time because they're the same. But the bodies are almost always a little bit different, and I do draw them every time because that allows them to drift over time. So as I showed you with the Tina character here, she started out as a skinny character, but she's going to be funnier, and this is the only reason to change it. She'll be a little bit funnier if she's a little chubbier. Just trust me on this, it'll be funnier. So I'm gonna morph her in time to become kind of a Karen character, and it'll just be funnier if she has a few extra pounds. So that gives us the first pass, just the heads. Then I draw the bodies, and then that's still just the first draft. And then the last thing I do is I draw over them the final art and disappear the layer below. And then the first draft is gone, and all I have is the top layer. And then we will add color. Now, adding the color is as simple as, and here's a little trick. If you're at home and you're trying to do this, there's always one thing that the experts will leave out. So when you try to do it yourself, it's just freaking impossible. So I'm going to take, oh, shit. That was my tripod deciding to crap out just before I was going to tell you the secret that you would never learn any other way. Coincidence? I don't know, maybe. But here's the secret. I draw this in grayscale in Photoshop, but then I change it to bitmap before I'm ready to add the color. The bitmap gets rid of the soft edges and turns them into hard edges, but because I'm drawing at the right scale, you can't tell that they're hard edges. So bitmap is fine at the scale I'm drawing. And then I take it and I switch it back into grayscale. And then from grayscale, and you only have to do this because it doesn't work unless you go through the intermediate step, into CMYK mode. See, now we're getting deep into the secret of cartooning. Once you're in CMYK mode, then you can just use the paint bucket tool and add the color, and it will be easy. But if you don't know the process of going from grayscale to bitmap, back to grayscale, all the way to CMYK, you have to figure out some other way to do it. And good luck with that. So there's always this one part that if you didn't know from trial and error or somebody didn't tell you, it would make you crazy trying to just solve that one thing. It's like, how come I add the color and it doesn't go all the way to the edges? And you would be crazy. So yes, then you can do an autofill, but you can also do a fill with a gradient that I sometimes use. Adobe only updates Photoshop to force you to relearn stuff. Oh my God, it's my biggest problem right now. Every time they upgrade Photoshop, I get in real trouble. Do I save the original into bitmap, losing the history? I do save the original grayscale. So originally I draw in grayscale. And I do save that before I do any other versions, yes. You have a physical copy of CS6. Yeah, it was fine on CS6, right? Did you ever need any more than that? I don't know. Everything else is just making you work harder. All right, that's all for now. And I will, I'm not going to keep this up too long on YouTube, maybe today at most. And after that, I'll put it on the Locals platform. So I've got a subscription community service there, and this will be there permanently. But for today, or at least for a few more hours, it'll be in replay on YouTube as well. You're asking, what about converting to vector? You could convert. You could. I mean, there's just lots of ways to do it. I just choose this way. That's all for now.